It gives me great pleasure to welcome the Fintech Circle here to Rise in Shoreditch this morning for the launch of the Institute, but more on that later. Barclays believes in the development of financial technologies, and particularly extends a welcome to entrepreneurs and founders who are prepared to take a risk to grow vibrant and strong companies, both startups and scale-ups. And we, 3 years ago, had an experiment around what we called the innovation hub that became the escalator that has now grown into Rise. We have about 50,000 square foot here. We have about 50 companies here, and we take many companies through our accelerated program, which is a 13-week program where we invest time with mentors and we develop product, and hopefully at the end of it, the cohort companies have become investable companies. And 90% of those companies are still viable, and about 70% of them have had first and second and third round of funding. So we're enjoying that. We're trying to learn how a big company changes the way it works with small companies and creates value at scale and pace. And that's changing the way we work within a large incumbent institution that's enjoyed many years of success. And we're trying to work with these companies to see where the next disruption is likely to occur and be part of it. So without further ado, once again, welcome. And you're about to hear about what we do at the Fintech Circle, which I think is a valuable convening group. And now the most important thing we're doing is extending the services to education through the Institute. So I'd like to welcome our esteemed leader.
Thanks so much, Michael. Wonderful, Michael. Thank you very much for welcoming all of us today. And welcome to all of you for joining us today to launch the Fintech Circle Institute here in London, an online learning platform with the most cutting-edge knowledge, expertise, and classes all in one place. That's our goal, so to make it really easy to learn, to upskill oneself, and to be ahead of the game in terms of new knowledge across all areas of financial technology. And now we wanted to show you a few slides. So we have got, if I go to the next page, so myself, I'm Suzanne Chisti. I'm the founder of Fintech Circle. I launched Fintech Circle 3 years ago after a long career in banking, and now we've got about 75,000 members globally. And as Michael said, we felt the next stage really is to talk about more learning, education after we launched the Fintech book last year. And you remember a year ago, it was the first globally crowdsourced book, and which went almost viral globally. So we are selling it in 107 countries. It's translated into 5 languages. And we felt that people want to learn more. And I just show you some interesting statistics, what we found out doing a survey with our global community. But before I go into the details, just I wanted to share with you the agenda. So first, I will give you an update, on our survey results, and then we've got a panel discussion with our advisory board, and then we have got much more time for breakfast and for networking and drinking and chatting with our lecturers, our advisory board members. So did you know that 94% of people in financial services are bluffing? It was really interesting. We asked this question in a survey which we conducted across financial services professionals, and we said, do you suspect either one of your colleagues or somebody whom you know to use terms such as AI, blockchain, artificial intelligence without actually knowing what those terms mean? And we thought maybe we would get 50% would say yes, but literally 94% came back and said yes. We know colleagues who do that, and probably most of you do the same thing, And I think that's something which is interesting and of course worrying at the same time, because if so many people use terms they don't understand, because they feel the need to use those terms to be seen as modern, as tech savvy, it's something which we want to help with. And equally we said, why do you feel that you're not completely up to date? And 69% of our respondents said it is because we don't have enough training. They said we lack the training in order to really understand what those digital skills are all about. And 22% said we are afraid it's too late to even catch up. And that's something which I found, really almost like a wake-up call. Because if there are so many people who are bluffing the knowledge, then the other part of our community thinks it's too late to catch up because they're impressed by these experts who might not really be, the experts they claim to be. So that's why, we really want to make sure that we make fintech education accessible for all. And we help people to understand those key terms, those key trends in detail. The other question we asked was, whom would you promote? And we gave people two choices. One choice was, would you go for somebody who's got 10 years of experience and no digital skills, 10 years of experience in banking, and no digital skills, or do you prefer somebody who only has got 5 years of financial services experience and lots of digital skills? And 84% went for option 2. They said we prefer people who have got, even if they just have got half the finance expertise, but we need the digital skills nowadays, we would promote them over the other choice. And so our goal with the Fintech Circle Institute really is to empower financial services professionals to learn about the future of finance and to make it easy and to make it fun as well. Our courses are up to 1 hour long, bite-sized, self-paced learning, which people can watch in the evening, on their way to work, on the weekend. And it's something which one can integrate into one's lives much easier than if it would be a 6 months or 1 year course. So we really want to make learning fun and easy and to be able to do, as part of our lives. What is really important, when we started it, we wanted to work with the best advisory board members. And we have got a stellar advisory board chosen to guide us in our curriculum to shape the vision and the future of the Fintech Circle Institute. And you have got various advisory board members here with you today. So if I can start out with Marcos Zacharias is here in the first row. We've got David Gregg with us here. We've got Michael Harte, who just spoke. We've got Kausalia Somalundram, who is here as well. And we've got Ben Brabin from Level 39. So we've got 5 advisory board members here with us today. And we really appreciate, all your expertise and your guidance and shaping the strategy and the vision for our future classes. Because one thing which is clear to us is, when we launch today, we will have 23 courses already on the platform. So literally, when you leave today, you can log on, you can watch and learn from 23 expert lecturers, the topics across finance. But we know that fintech is changing rapidly, so we will upload and add new courses every month. So that's our vision, really, to upload new courses and share new expertise every month. The categories of the Fintech Circle Institute go from Fintech General. We focused on 3 topics: Wealth Tech, RegTech, and InsurTech. These are 3 key topics which are also aligned to our books, which will be published in January next year. One category we teach as well is blockchain, cryptocurrencies. One is enterprise innovation, which is a key topic, for most of us. And one is startup methodologies, such as design thinking, what to learn, how to work with startups, and really build an ecosystem of successful players around yourself. So those are the courses, those are the categories. And in order to launch our institute, we decided to work with the best teachers. And we have got many of our lecturers with us today. And what I would like to do is maybe if you can all stand up now so that everybody can see you. So all our lecturers, if you could stand up. And a big applause, I think, for them. So we've got an incredible group of lecturers here, and they're all happy to talk to you afterwards, to tell you about their classes, which you can watch literally online after our launch event this morning. And we've got them here on this page and also summarized on our next page. And we will share all this on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on our Twitter account. So I forgot to mention that, but you see that we have got FTC_Institute. This is our new Twitter account. So we have got a hashtag which is called Fintech Skills. So please feel free to share and help us, share the our launch today. So these are our wonderful lecturers, and I'm really happy that so many of you came and so many of you were flying in, because we have got lecturers globally. So many of you were flying in to be with us this morning. The way we will launch is we will initially offer a period until end of December where we provide people free access to our platform to try it out, to learn, learn about the courses, get up to speed with what Fintech offers. And from the 1st of January onwards, we will start charging £250 per member, per individual member, per year. So it's almost like a one dinner per month, to invest in your education. So £250 per year. And what we do now, we offer a launch offer, but only for the first 1,000 members, which is to sign up and get 4 years membership for the price of 2. So this is our launch offer for £500 to get 4 years membership, which is basically until January 22. And then we will also have some very exclusive memberships, such as global ambassadors, founding partners, which start at £5,000. And what we do here, we will offer exclusive access to events which we are launching next year. One event will be the Fintech Circle Summit, a kind of an exclusive event which we plan to do probably outside of London with the leaders of finance, almost like Davos, but a Fintech Davos here in the UK, but then also globally as a next step. So that's our plan for 2018. I also would like to announce that we have got a partnership with Thomson Reuters. In addition to holding online courses, we will also provide in-person training in the form of 3 masterclasses in London. And we focus again on the 3 key topics: RegTech, Wealth Tech and InsurTech. And you've got here the dates already for these 3 courses with you. And so you're all very welcome to join. We will send out the invitations for these masterclasses next week. And these will be in-person trainings for about 25 to 30 people. So we'll be kind of in a smaller group and in-person for the whole day. Really kind of an immersion session for people to get into the details. So to summarize, we believe, and I am a firm believer, that investment in education really pays the best interest, the best dividends. And so that's what our goal, our vision is today, to really make sure that we all can invest in our education, can upskill ourselves, and to make it accessible to everybody in the UK, but also globally, to learn about the future of finance. So thank you very much for joining us for the launch. And what I would like to do now is to invite our advisory board members on stage for our panel discussion. So David, please, and Marcos and Kausalia, please. Maybe we can do it like so. David, if you sit here, Kausalia, the third one, Marcos on the here, just behind our pictures. Okay. Yes. So, thank you very much for joining our advisory board today. What I would like to do now is just to have a discussion with all of you about, the future trends, things you see in finance, and then also open up to all of you for questions to really get, the feedback and the thoughts of our advisory board. So if I start out, maybe first just to introduce yourselves, please, and I hand over to David.
Thank you, Suzanne, and congratulations on the launch. I think this is a fantastic opportunity because, as you say, there are a lot of bluffers out there, probably because people want to know more and want to understand more about something which is moving very quickly. I'm the president of Financial and Risk at Thomson Reuters. We run the global business in financial services. We like to think of ourselves as the first fintech. 150 years ago, when we realized that transmitting news by Morse code versus pigeons, there was a kind of digital revolution, if you like, in technology in financial services. And so, in a way, finance and technology have been growing up together for 100 years. There's nothing really new here, other than right at the moment there's a big confluence between a few things. Some new, very exciting technologies coming. Some big problems in the financial industry to solve because there's a lot of big inefficiencies that are out there. And lastly, some consumer experiences and technology which are driving and demanding that banks operate in a different way. And I think those three things are creating an extraordinary distortion in financial services. And when you see distortionary effects in any industry, be it from steam to electricity in the manufacturing industry 60 or 70 years ago, things change, structures change, businesses change. And I think the most important thing around the education need at the moment is not per se the technology itself and getting underneath the skin of exactly how does distributed ledger work, but how could it be applied? What are the changes that you might expect? How do you regulate or create new rules and ground rules either by official bodies or industry consortiums, those type of things for these technologies, and how do you emerge? And if you wind back to the dot-com explosion that many of us experienced, some 15, 20 years ago, it wasn't the technology in itself that made things change. It was the application of that technology and the models and the industry changes that forced. And I think that's why we feel that the partnership with the Fintech Institute to help people understand what those changes might look like and how they could be applied would be very important.
Great, thank you very much. Kausalia.
Thank you. I don't know whether you can hear me actually okay at the back, because I don't know whether this mic is working. I'm going to try and speak louder. Firstly, Suzanne, congratulations. I know it's taken a bit of effort to actually get here, and a great job done. And, thanks to all the advisory board members. I've just literally started working with Suzanne and the team, and it's been an incredible journey already. I think we've got a lot of exciting things to do going forward, in particular education. I'm a firm believer of education. I've got 2 young children myself, and I think we have to invest heavily in what we do going forward. Technology is going to play a key part in that, without any doubt. Again, it's going beyond just the surface level, I think, and going deeply into what technology actually means, and to what Tom was saying about really understanding the applications of technology and the likes. With that in mind, I set up a team about a little over a year ago within HSBC, and I head up the FinTech Partnerships team. Previously, I was actually in the venture capital arm, investing in early stage startups and scale-ups as well. And again, it's been very, very exciting and interesting within HSBC as well to see the journey that we've been through from right the way when we started the innovation team centrally back in 2014 to actually much more of a decentralized model within the bank with multiple businesses and product lines taking part in the activities of the firm. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Marco Zachariadis. As Suzanne said, I'm an associate professor at Warwick Business School, and I'm a fellow at the University of Cambridge, where I've spent a couple of years doing research on digital innovation. Congratulations for the launch, and very well done. I think this is an incredible opportunity to put people who really know some stuff from the industry, to put them together on a platform which is fully accessible, and this kind of knowledge can be shared with pretty much everybody who's really interested in learning more about these very topical kind of things in terms of technology and finance. I mean, I think I'll agree with David. Technology and finance are not something new. Technology has been in finance for probably centuries, depending on what you describe as technology being. And financial services have been the heaviest investor in technology for decades. But I think the difference here is the issue of vision. I think for the first time, maybe technology has been a strategic tool that needs to work side by side with business strategy and shape the entire business in itself, and not just automate functions. I mean, we're just discussing that with David. In fact, it's funny because 10 years ago, when I was starting my PhD at the London School of Economics, David came by. He was then at McKinsey. He came by and gave a presentation about the impact of IT in the financial services sector. And we both agreed back then it was all about automation and cutting costs. I think it's way more than that today. And obviously having access to resources that can be also an inspiration as well as a useful knowledge is really important. About myself, as I said, I'm a professor. We have different projects at Warwick Business School, ranging from blockchain, open APIs, or other kind of technologies that will impact the finance sector. I think we always look not just the technology and the fundamental kind of characteristics of it, but also what is the possible impact, what the business models, and also what theory we have in technology and this innovation for years can be applied into that particular context. So I think that's me.
That's excellent. Thank you very much for these great introductions. I think one question I think many of us have been discussing, over breakfast already, is almost what is the future of finance and how can we prepare for it? We as individuals working in financial services. So that's a question I wanted to ask now our advisory board members. So how do you see the future of finance changing, and how can people prepare, for it?
Pick on me first. I think fundamentally lots of things won't change. So the distribution of risk, the management of risk, the ability to support transactions, the importance of relationships in finance. I think it's important to not get sort of caught in the hyperbole that some of the fundamentals all go away and change and they disappear. And I think as we think about training and education, and institutions like HSBC or Barclays think about who their leaders of the future are, they mustn't lose track of some of those fundamentals of financial services and banking. But what is going to change? I think first and foremost, many of the infrastructures that we have in financial services today, what we've essentially done is we've taken manual processes and we've automated them and put electronification around that. I mean, I'll take sort of clearing or payments as two examples. There are thousands of people and billions of dollars spent on infrastructures which are relatively inefficient. I think one of the exciting things about the future, which maybe makes some people nervous, is that some of those central infrastructures and things that have been put in place may actually change and be more federated. I think there's lots of experiments and trials in just that area happening at the moment. But I think that's something that is inevitable. And actually, if you're running a big clearinghouse today, in securities, and many of the leaders of the clearinghouses have said this, that their role might change from a centralized clearing function to an enabler of standards for how clearing takes place. So I think that's just one example. I think about payments where much of the Fintech activity has happened. And I think about how difficult it is to do cross-border payments today, and the cost and the expense and the regulation involved in that. there are now models out there that have streamlined that and made it much more effective, just in areas of like remittances, cross-border payments for financial transactions, and those areas. So I think we're going to see a lot more streamlined activity, and actually business models being created around that opportunity. I think a really interesting question is, how do the big incumbent institutions respond to the smaller, more nimble companies that are setting this up, and do we see some kind of confluence and merger of the two as they recognize that? And these are all up for question and debate. I wouldn't pretend to be an expert that understands the answer. But I think in periods of change in any industry, it's that structural change that you see. But I think the fundamentals of financial services do not go away, but the application and the automation, the removal of intermediaries might be something that happens because of the technology.
Makes sense. Marcelia?
Yeah, I agree with everything that David has said, actually. I was just going to add, I almost feel like in the future of finance is actually already here. But in some ways, I think it's very difficult to say what it'll look like in the future. But I think one thing that I believe is going to happen is there are certain type of ingredients that are going to be critical for the success of the future, right? So in order for you to survive and actually succeed, you need to have automation, you will need intelligence, you will need, for example, great design. It's something that Suzanne spoke about earlier. And also interconnectedness. So for example, the linkages between data and functions beyond finance, I think, is becoming more and more critical. So we talk about things like structured and unstructured data. How do we get analytics beyond, what we have currently? So these are some of the things that, we ourselves and other banks in the street are actually really giving it a lot of thought. The other one that I will also say is in terms of skill set, right, going forward, future skill sets, it's really important to actually embrace technology, and like I said before, beyond just the surface level, and really having an attitude for continuous learning, ongoing learning, because the type of jobs that we'll be doing, I think, in the future are going to be very much skill-based, that require much of the human touch and relationship management-based ones, so where you become the trusted advisors. And we've seen that very much in the cases the likes of robo-advisory, to name a few, where the previous fund managers who've just literally beaten the market index have, not necessarily kind of thrived through the robo-advisory models, but actually those one who have become the trusted advisors, who are actually beating the market index by a mile, those are the ones that are actually going to, outperform the robots. So I think that is probably going to be likely to be the future. So I think, again, feeding it back into why we are all here today is really about, the ongoing learning, embracing actually the creativity. A lot of the jobs I think we'll be doing is we're going to be very, very creative, and also embracing technology in that journey.
Just on the point of data, I would agree with you. Is it actually working?
I'm finding it difficult to hear. Sorry.
It's a bluffing tool. It's not working.
It goes to the video.
Oh, I see. I just want to make a point on the data. When I joined our company 10 years ago, we collected several gigabytes of data a day. We now collect a petabyte of data a day, yet we have the same number of people in our data organization. So the jobs they do have completely changed from ones of manually collecting data and organizing that to now supervising machines and machine learning and things that we use to collect that petabyte of data a day. So I think your point about every financial institution is going to be a data institution is really important.
Yeah. So this is a placebo. Oh, it's for the camera. I'm sorry. So I think I agree with everything that has been said, obviously. And I would, I had 3 words here that probably summarize to some degree what has already been mentioned. I think automation, especially with the digital revolution, is going to be even higher. It's already started for decades now, but I think automation is something that will not stop. So further investment in IT will lead to automated quite different functions within finance. And of course, there are many sub-industries with finance, so it's kind of hard to generalize. But automation, I think, is a really key ingredient. Then more integrated. Not centralized, but integrated with other platforms and infrastructures that exist and beyond finance. So being able to tap onto services within financial services, but from outside the industry. and integrating with other services that already exist in maybe the retail or the technology and different kind of industries. And that will obviously break a lot of silos within finance that already exist at the moment. And obviously smarter, with all the data that have been collected, I think if you put them into good use, they're going to provide more capability for better decision making, either from the side of the machine, but also using that kind of data, data-driven decision making, as we say, for human decisions as well. So in any case, I think these three characteristics probably would represent that.
It's a really good point. So the one thing we see is the boundaries of financial services are now blurring. So some of the biggest financial services players are, I'm going to have to hold this microphone even though it doesn't work. I am bluffing. Some of the biggest financial services players are not financial services firms. So Tencent, Amazon, Google, I mean, these are significant financial service players now, and that is going to continue. And I think there's going to be more technology firms blurring with financial services. So if you work in financial services in the future, you may not work for Barclays or HSBC. You may actually be working for a technology firm, and I'm sure that keeps Michael awake at night on thinking through that.
I think that's a key topic. Do you know what I mean? Because when we think about what our tech giants do, from Google, Amazon, Apple, I never thought that Amazon would give loans to people. They're giving loans now to people, as we know, or that Facebook and Google would set up their own banking license. We did not expect those things to happen, and it's just a question of time. Before, and it's a good point you made. David, at what stage when you say you work in financial services, it's a certain number of companies you expect to work in, but in the future this might be all the tech giants might be part of that, and especially in China with those Baidu and Tencent and Alibaba, we see a huge trend towards that. And that's interesting because we published the book in Mandarin actually this week. It just came out in Mandarin this week. And so that's something which I think the whole China market is fascinating to watch, what happens there. I think one last question I've got for you guys before we open up to all of you to ask any questions you've got is what skills should people learn to future-proof their careers? What are the skills maybe which can't be automated, or any skills which really are most important to acquire to make sure that you are on top of your game for the next 10 years?
Should we start the other end this time?
Yes, let's start from
Right. I think, as an academic, I think I'll have to say that critical thinking is one of the first things that we want our students at the business school to really kind of engage with and become more comfortable. I think learning about technology is important, obviously, but it's something that if you have the resources, like the Fintech Institute, the Fintech Circle Institute, for example, to gain this knowledge, that really is an important step, but will get you to some degree. I think it's not just about following the trends, but it is also about thinking beyond what the current trend is to how technology can be used, for example, strategically. And not just technology, pretty much any topic. So, for example, what it means to use technology and kind of have it closely related with the strategy of the company, or what it means to use the technology maybe to build even a platform. What are the fundamentals maybe of the platform, right? So going back to theory we have in economics, in terms of transaction cost economics or network economics, network effects, as we say sometimes. So all these kind of skills at the more kind of fundamental level, which kind of allow people to be critical, not just follow the trend, but also see beyond the trends and kind of apply these kind of critical thinking. I think that'd be my number one maybe point. I'm sure there are other stuff.
Yeah, I think in terms of skill sets, it's being passionate about, I think, the field that you're in. I think passion is going to be very, very important. And keeping a track on and staying on top of actually what's happening in the market, right? So changes that are happening through, again, continuous and ongoing learning, and embracing and adapting accordingly, because change is happening so fast. What's relevant, this week, and, people quite often ask me, what are the top 5 or 10 things that are happening this week? And, it seems to be quite rapidly changing, and then comes next week and is like different aspect of it altogether. Perhaps with the same thread, but very different. So I think change is happening very, very rapidly. Data is growing very, very fast. I think one of the statistics quite often that I quote is like 80% of the data that it's currently we have has been created just in the last 2 years. It's quite a phenomenon, sort of escalation in the amount of data that we hold. And the other thing also is, I think from a skill set perspective, what's happening with automation is that anything that is transactional or repetitive tasks, they are the ones who are effectively prone to the highest amount of risk in terms of automation. So anything to do with relationship management that involves human touch, right? So that's valued by the customers, that is going to be very much in demand. So going forward, I think the skills that we will have will be related to similar type of activities, and also things where there's a high degree of uncertainty. So we live in a world where everything is becoming very, very digital, so you have to be able to adapt. So any skills where you're actually providing some kind of advisory services, where effectively, the machines can't replace a human, where there is a level of uncertainty that requires a certain level of decision making. I think those are the skill sets. I think they'll be very much in demand again.
Yeah, I agree with everything that you've said with the two panelists. I think there's going to be 3 types of leader, if I try and simplify this. Who's going to win? What's the hot job of the future? I've got 3 kids just going through school. I'm thinking, what should they learn? They're either going to have to be in the catering or the hospitality business, or they're going to be physicists in engineering. I'm not sure which way they're leaning at the moment. They're only 11, so I think business leaders will change. Business leaders now. Some very successful business leaders grew up by getting things done, but the problem now is that a lot of those things are going to be automated. So the future business leader needs to be a problem solver. Whether they're in the lending business or the corporate finance business or M&A or transactions, any part of the financial institution, they're going to have the data they need to solve problems. That is going to be automated away. How do they analyze the market using that data? How do they really understand the problem, and how do they thrive from that? So I think the business leader, and they may be a business leader, or they may be a leader in marketing or finance, those roles will change. It's far more automated, and therefore the value of decision making and analytics is increasing. In technology, the second group, these people are really now changing the way we do things and automating away the inefficiencies that we've had. And that's where the technology is exciting, because rather than just replicating manual processes that we've had in the past and automating those, it's actually changing the structure of how things get done. So I think that is very exciting. I think there's a third role, which we're just discovering how important this is, which is the regulatory and legal area of the new technology. I don't think governments and regulators and bodies have yet really got their head around what these new technologies mean, what this data means, what the public-private issues are around that, cryptocurrencies, you name it. I think there's a real gap around regulatory and legal skills of these new technologies, which, like anything in regulation of financial services, traverses the politics, the government, the public perspective. Data privacy is just a good example of where you see this debate happening. So 3 groups of really important people, all changing how they operate and how they function. And I think the business leaders of the future will master those domains and grow. If I can simplify it into 3 areas, that they'll master those domains and be successful that way.
It's fantastic insights. So thank you very much. I think when we had our advisory board meeting just last week, we started out by showing one email which I received literally just a week ago, 10 days ago. And it was an email asking me for advice because this company wanted to do their first ICO, to raise money. And they asked, can you give us an ICO PR person, an ICO marketing agency, and an ICO advisor? And I thought to myself, I mean, now that's the best example. We've got 3 new jobs here. You know, you all know ICOs are initial coin offerings, which is like the topic everybody wants to learn more. Of course, we've got an expert lecturer here with us today who can tell you more about it. But you know, those roles just don't exist yet. But luckily I had Ben is on the advisory board, and Ben New has got a company, you know, at level 39 who provides those services. But it just shows how cutting edge, you know, we are going, and that there are new jobs coming out which basically have not been needed in the past, and new roles, you know, which just didn't exist. So it's really fascinating, I think, to see that. So maybe if I open up now to you, have you got any questions for our advisory board? Yes, please, Brennan. Just have to speak loud, yes.
I suppose the first one is there's also the ICO lawyer is the other job that you want to look at the moment, I think. Maybe a question of Shalia. Do you think that large financial institutions are bluffing it when it comes to collaborating with early stage fintech firms? And do you believe there's a requirement for education for your procurement departments to actually interact differently with early stage firms?
Okay, thank you, Brandon. In terms of bluffing, I think, you know, every organization is made up of people, right? Ultimately, it'll come down to the individual. So, you know, if I look at HSBC in terms of journey we've taken, 2014, we set up the Central Innovation Team. And one of the primary reasons for that was to actually bring the people along that journey of innovation, you know, getting them to understand whatever things that are market trends that are happening. Why is it important actually to partner with whether it's fintech or even larger tech established firms and the likes? Because as Marcus said before, you know, financial technology has existed for quite a few decades, right? Banking as a whole has existed for centuries. And through different evolution of tech waves, we have seen different things happening. So if you think about when the computers came around, a lot of it was about automation. A number of jobs that were being created were also being, you know, replaced by other things, or being also destroyed. This wave, in the current wave of technology, what we're seeing is a trend whereby I think there is a short-term period in which there is a market dislocation, as I call it, whereby the jobs that are being created are actually not able to keep up with the pace of the destruction in a way, right? Because technology is eating up a vast number of jobs in terms of automation. So I think that is what I think that the recognition has come about internally within the incumbent organization. So it's been more about upskilling those skills, because the new jobs that are being created are not going to be similar to the ones that have been destroyed. So it's really going to be about the skill set. So in order to answer your first question, you really have to put it in perspective of what does it actually mean. It is really about embracing innovation and technology. It is about education, experimentation, right? Research and development, you know, vast amount of money. And, you know, Michael in this lab is a good example of that, is actually being spent on actually creating that ecosystem to develop and work with these tech players externally. So I think we've come a long way. So I wouldn't necessarily call it bluffing, because if you have to put it in perspective of where we started and where we got to. In terms of your second question, Brandon, is it about procurement process? I think that is part of the challenge, right? Again, you know, to Brandon's point earlier, a lot of the technology that we have, you know, they're very, very niche propositions. So, and they've not been tested and trial for, you know, at least for a minimum of a certain number of years. You know, a number of them are been around, you know, whether it's TransferWise and all of those companies, for less than, you know, 7 years, you know, which is kind of like the minimum time you have to be able to show that, you know, you can take the default data to be able to capture to show that, you know, default cannot happen, or, you know, or at least the probability of default. So I think in most cases, I think with the fintech phenomenon, it is still very early stage in terms of the evolution of that. I think we're going to see a lot more that is going to come through this funnel. Procurement process, I think, as a whole, you know, we are part of a group of banks, Michael, myself, and a bunch of others who are actually thinking about, how do we actually streamline and make the process much more efficient and better when we're interacting with the external community, because I think some of these processes might have been around for a number of decades. Again, can we get better at it? Absolutely. And there are efforts going behind the scenes actually to make that relationship and partnership better.
Great question. Yes, please.
Hi. If everyone suspects every one of his peers to be bluffing with respect to this set of knowledge, how do you reconcile that with the other statement or the response that you got from the survey, where 90% of the people say that they would like to learn from their peers who are bluffing at the end of the day?
Yeah, I can respond to that. The way we reconciled it was because the question was asked: do you want to learn from peers who are practicing fintech, who are in the world of fintech, or do you want to learn from theoretic leaders or the theoretic teachers? And that's where people said we want to learn from people at the cutting edge of finance, of technology, and not from theorists. I think this was the point. But you're right. I think it's very important to make sure that you judge and that you get to know the person who is teaching you, and that you make sure that these people, who use terms and that they are experts in their field. And that's what our qualification criteria is. So most of the way we select our teachers, is either experts, authors, from our book series, experts in finance. So our own goal is to filter out, the best thought leaders. But equally for anybody of you, I definitely advise you to meet people in person. I know some people online, and when I see online how they put their comments on LinkedIn or which posts to put on LinkedIn, I know it's not them. These posts are written by somebody else. In some cases, I even know who is doing the writing behind it. Because if you would meet this person in person, you could not have a conversation on this topic with them. And I think probably people like that as well. So I think it's to some extent it comes down, to your experience of meeting somebody just online versus meeting people in person then, and to see is there really substance behind. Yeah. Yes, please.
I guess a question for David. I'm going to pick on you because I'm a long-term Thomson Reuters user. So when Thomson Reuters launched Icon, they also shortly after added data regarding social media usage. This was quite a key moment, I think, in financial data. The question is, you referred earlier to judgment. How much is fintech going to be driven by the individual user experience versus fintech that enables social networks to come to decisions?
It's a really great question. I mean, the context of your experience was, financial markets and trading have worked off factual data, and then along rides social media, which is not factual, it's judgment-based, it's crowd-based. But of course, what we quickly realized was if you run the correlation of your stock price against a social media confidence graph, there's a correlation. So we've then changed judgment into fact. There's a factual correlation between social graphs and share price. So hence why we launched a social graph that did exactly that. And then the traders would say, right, I plug in my social graph to my trading algorithm. I've got a fact-based algorithm. So it's a great example where an individual now has said, I'm going to take some data, some other insights, and run a trading algorithm against social graphs. And then, of course, you've got that trader then needs to know that there are people out there deliberately putting the fake news on social media and trading against it, and hence why lawyers start to come into this quite quickly. But I think your question is, to what degree do individuals disappear and institutions take over because of data and these analytics? I mean, we have a really interesting phenomenon at the moment, which was we now have more customers of our information and transactions who are machines than users. And I had a debate with a marketing group the other day who, for years have been running surveys of users, what's it like using Thomson Reuters products, with all that stuff. And I said, how do you survey machines? Yeah, how do you get loyalty from a machine? And it's a great example of where we're struggling with our traditional customer base was serving individual users, and now we're serving the machines of the institutions. The important thing to recognize is behind every machine so far, and I think for the future, is a human. Yeah. There is a human that has designed that algorithm, that is controlling that algorithm, that is managing that infrastructure, that is understanding how it works. So they're your ultimate customer at the moment. So we've had to rebase our relationship and our marketing surveys and our design and our engagement with the humans who are the CTOs, the technologists, the business people who are understanding that, to run those machines. The day that the machines start running the machines, which some people write about, I think we all need to get quite worried. And that day may arrive, and we've got some other challenges around it. But from our own experiences, we've had to rebase from a business which was based 90% on users to now is 50% users and 50% machines. And I think in the banking industry, people are waking up to this idea as well. We run an ecosystem where we have 8,000 partners on our platform, and the banks are very similar in this, that many of our customers now are machines that are using our data and then serving another customer. So we've had to really change our business model, knowing that we're not necessarily serving the ultimate user, but we're serving a fintech or a company that's then serving those users as well. And I think every company in this industry is going through similar kind of change at the moment. I mean, I just want to add a comment on your question of are companies bluffing or not? I think the car industry is very analogous to what the financial industry is going through at the moment. How many car companies are there out there now who haven't realized they can't bluff about electric and hybrid cars? Every single car industry is in somewhat panic about what Tesla and the other companies are doing to their industries. My own experience of many of the leaders in financial services is there's kind of okay, 3 years ago we could bluff, but actually we're in a bit of panic now because we've realized that a moment of distortion and dislocation is happening to our industry. And my own experience is that actually the bluffing is kind of going away, and people are now starting to get quite serious about the change that's coming and how they invest behind it. Did I answer your question? It was a really tough question, but I was trying to kind of get to that.
Yeah, there was a few different tales to it, wasn't there?
Yeah.
I suppose there was a slightly other aspect to it. Being a Scotsman, some people may have guessed that already, is from Adam Smith, wisdom of the crowd, invisible hands. Is there a huge enabler here to be had from fintech that social communities of professionals, of people can actually come together to drive better outcomes than is possible as an individual?
Well, I would really agree with. Actually, your business, the business model here of social crowdsourcing knowledge for training and for books is a classic example to do that. So I think there's many more business models that haven't been invented that could do exactly that.
Just to touch on your analogy there on the cars, the problem with the electric car is there going to be enough plug points to actually plug all your cars into? And that was exactly my point with respect to are the financial institutions, which are the power points, actually going to be there to actually interface with all the fintech?
Yeah, I mean, my son who's choosing what topics to study, I said, you might not want to do the combustion engine one, you might want to do the motor and battery. But the electricity grid companies are going through panic at the moment because they've realized they don't know how to support. It's a great opportunity for them, and more business models will arise because that's actually right.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that one actually, because I think it is about the new business models. Because again, Suzanne asked the question around what does the future of finance look like, and I think it is very, very difficult to say, because I think we will definitely see new business models forming. Again, to Marcus' point earlier, the line between what is a financial services industry, what is an automobile, all the sectorial difference is becoming much, much more bleaker, right? It's all combining. We are working with companies across multiple sectors. And so when we think about financial services, it's not just about the traditional kind of lending and deposit taking institutions anymore. It's much more wider and beyond that. And then I think the other thing also to bear in mind is, everything comes down to the trust. We are still, myself, I bank with HSBC, I also bank with other banks. We want to make sure that our deposits are actually in the safe pair of hands. And I think that's what the traditional banking model is all about. It is about trust-based model. And I think that still is there, right? So banks are there as a trusted entity. And, regulation is instilled on us. And that's what we have to make sure that, the we are, regulatory compliant. So everything that's coming again to linking up to your question around design thinking, right? I think that is going to be super critical because customer relationship at the front end is going to be determined by actually how you actually service this customer journeys, right? UX, user experience, user design. So I think design agency as a skill set as well. Design is going to be again a very, very important skill to have, because a lot of the banks, I think, there is a real danger, to David's point, that the banks may get relegated to the back-end processing, which are the unprofitable businesses, right? The ones which are highly regulated and highly licensed models. So again, the partnership between the two is going to be a critical factor.
Perfect. So I think we've got one last question. Yes, please. Yes.
So my question is on open banking. So as you know, all the big banks are really busy, opening up their APIs, for the January deadline and open the customer data and all of that. And now working with big banks, my sense is that the banks are having to do that rather than wanting to do it. So that's the perception for the big banks. I'm just curious, how do the fintechs perceive open banking? Are they getting up on new business propositions, with the new data becoming available, or are they just kind of standing by and not really believing in it? So what are your views on that?
I might actually ask Michael to chip in here as well, actually, because he's sitting there in front of me, rather than me taking all of these questions. Because I think when I think about open banking, and with this PSD2, CMA, and the likes, I must be honest with you, about a year ago, if you had asked me this question, I think there was probably a sense of nervousness as to what that actually means for the banking industry, particularly in terms of data sharing. Not that we weren't sharing this data already. A lot of the transaction data that is being required or for us to share, actually we were sharing, but perhaps maybe charging a fee for it, right? Whereas in the new model, I think we can't charge a fee for it. So that we have to think about how do we therefore commercialize and monetize the data that we currently have beyond just charging a fee model. Sure, that's what has changed. So that's why we have the likes of, the new way of thinking is how can we build microservices on top of the data that we are already sharing? Because on one hand, we are sharing the data, but the other hand, we are also receiving some additional new data that we perhaps may not have had in the past. So we see it now as more of an opportunity than as a threat, because there's a great new way of actually building these new services, new business models. An example of that is we're thinking about what do we become as an identity provider, right? As an identity service provider, what does the future of banking look like in the construct of identity? Because again, we hold a lot of data. We are a trusted, security and identity provider. So again, there are opportunities for us to actually evolve in that. And from a fintech perspective, so a lot of the technology aspects on the open banking and PSD, I absolutely agree, it's been more focused from the banking side, but we are starting to see more and more companies who are looking at from the fintech perspective, right? So what does it actually mean? So if the fintechs were to integrate to the banking systems, how easy can we make it for them, right, in terms of APIs? Because it's been more one-way API-led. It's about bank issuing APIs. Now it's like fintech embracing on the other side. So that's the other thing that I'm seeing as well. Michael, I don't know whether you want to add anything more to it, but welcome to the stage.
I think you nailed it.
But
that absolutely nails the answer. But I think even larger opportunities are going to come from everything that is open. So we've typically been institutions that crave closed loops so that we can attract only certain risk types and have more certainty and charge higher premiums accordingly. But everything has to be open if we're going to open data. So it's not just banking that needs to open, it's also open source software, it's also the openness of networks. So we see other closed companies and other closed networks that also have to open so that we can share this data. And it's going to revolutionize the way old banks have to interact with customers and how they have to create value. But it's also going to have flow-on effects because you're going to see more open healthcare and more open education, and this inequality that's resulted from a lot of closed systems and closed software and closed networks. They're all going to go through this disruption as well, and that's a great thing.
Thanks, Michael.
Yes, Thank you very much for this great panel. Thank you very much for the great questions. What we want to invite you now is, number one, to be interviewed. We've got a whole video crew here. We want to ask you, all our lecturers, our advisory board members, our guests, if you could join us, to our interview, gentlemen here, and speak and let them know. We've got questions prepared. We've literally 2 minutes, 1 minute little updates about your experience, about the future of finance, and what you think are the key digital skills. So those things we want to invite you now to get videotaped, and we will share that with our 75,000 members. So it's only if you want to be public, please join us for the video interviews. And secondly, we've got more croissants, more breakfast in front of us, more coffee and tea. So please stay with us and let's have chats now much more informally, just to get to know each other. So thank you all very much for coming, and thanks very much for the great panel.